Welcome to the Church Communications Podcast, powered by Church Visuals. We believe that effective communication is integral to leading your congregation and community. Join Katie Allred and Carl Barnhill each week to dive into insights and strategies that will help you grow your church. Whether you're a pastor, a church leader, or someone interested in maximizing your communication to make a difference, you're in the right place. Let's get started.
Welcome to the Church Communications Podcast. I'm Katie Allred, and again, I'm joined by Carl Barnhill. Carl, how are you doing?
Again? You make it sound like it's a chore. I think it's a
chore
joy hanging
that
out with
I
you.
am choosing and I love with
right.
joy.
That's right. It is. It has been so much fun hanging out with you, and I'm excited about today's conversation.
I am too. So, Sallie Guillory is our guest for today. Sallie's been in the Facebook group for a while now and has always offered really great advice to our members and has come from a lot of different experience at different large churches. And I think she has really great perspective on a lot of different things. So, Sallie, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I am good. Thank you guys for having me today.
Yeah, no, thank you for being here. I think the first thing I would love to hear is maybe a little bit of your story and how you got to where you are now and where you are now and, those kind of things along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. So probably an unconventional path than most church communications people. I started as a college basketball coach, actually. Did that for a few years and kind of really just towards the end of that time, around 2015, felt like the Lord was just kind of calling me into a different ministry space. Coaching was ministry, but really just felt the call and a shift to full-time ministry. And I didn't know what that looked like. And as I began talking to my pastor and praying and processing, he just asked me to pray about an opportunity to join the team at the church I was going to begin an athletic ministry. So I thought, well, this is going to be cool. I can combine ministry and athletics. And so jumped into that and fell in love with it. And then not too long after that, the youth pastor at our church moved on to a different role. And so the pastor came to me and our athletic ministry team and said, well, hey, you guys are already working with kids and youth. Why don't y'all take over the youth? And so we said, okay. No idea what we were doing, but we jumped right into it and learned a ton and had a blast doing it. Still have such a great heart for youth ministry, but just kind of started doing that. And then it ended up getting involved in college ministry, did some outreach. And then kind of along those lines, a few years later, the pastor came to me and said, hey, our creative director is leaving. What do you think about jumping into that? And I remember just looking at him like, as clueless as I was about youth, at least I had worked with high school students before. I had never really worked with creatives and communications and that type of stuff. So, but just said yes. And, believed that God was going to meet me then there, and he did. And so that's kind of how my journey into church communications started. And I'll tell you, Katie, I have fallen in love with it. It's something I never, ever dreamed or thought about or prayed about or wanted to do or anything. But I have just found a true calling in it and did that for a few years at our church in Louisiana. And then in 2020, ended up moving. One of our campus pastors at our broadcast location became the senior pastor at Times Square Church in New York City. And just felt like another kind of moment of God kind of asking me to step into something that I was unsure of, and did that and stayed there for a few years and loved it. We had a great time, being a part of a great church in such a unique city like New York, in the middle of a pandemic and in the middle of everything else. And then started doing that and was working with a few churches towards the end, doing some coaching and consulting, and got an opportunity to meet a lot of great people. And then in March of 2023, so a few months back, ended up moving here to beautiful Orange County, Southern California, and joined the incredible team at Saddleback Church, where I have the privilege now to serve as the communications director here at Saddleback.
So basketball background. So yep. I'm gonna be dropping as many basketball puns in this interview as I
Let's go, Carl.
Right?
Come on.
So
I'm gonna dunk them.
Don't drop the ball. No.
Okay. No, I got it. Assist me, set me up.
All right. Here's your first alley-oop. Okay.
All right.
All right. Let's talk about the landscape of church communication. So, what have you seen, obviously, from your experience, which is vast, and you have such a diversity of experiences in your background. Tell me how you've seen church communications, the landscape evolve or change over the last few years. I know the pandemic obviously in there, but maybe the last decade or so. What have you seen as some of the more significant shifts and changes?
Yeah, obviously the most pressing one and the thing we all know is just the shift into digital. The pandemic kind of accelerated it. There was a lot of churches who were doing online church and YouTube and digital marketing and things like that very well before the pandemic, but the pandemic kind of forced everybody to get into the game. And it's, crisis, I can't remember who said this, somebody said crisis is just an accelerator for change. And that's what I think the pandemic did in the best way. And it made every church realize that you've got to get into this game. But I think, obviously that's a big shift. But the thing that I think I've learned the most over these last few years in church comms is that the technology may change, but people never really change. Our human nature, the way that God wired us, has never changed. The algorithms change, technology change, but us as humans and the messaging doesn't change. We love stories. Jesus was the best storyteller. And so our role in church communications is, we're chief storytellers in everything that we're doing, whether it's an email, a social media post, a website, whatever. So that has not changed, but obviously the way that we do that has changed a ton as we've gotten into different ways. And, I'm not an expert by any means in AI type stuff, but obviously we're stepping into a whole new world of that. And that's something that I'm trying to, a few years ago, I felt like I was always learning about, okay, how do we do social media? How do we do email marketing? And now I find myself just constantly trying to listen to podcasts and learn how do we integrate AI and ChatGPT to what we're doing as church communicators?
With that though, with new technology, how do we not jump on there's a jumping on the bandwagon kind of thing, and there's also like I guess how much should we lead the edge in that? Should we jump on every single bandwagon that comes along? Should we be more hesitant? Should we be like, tell me how you usually step into a new technology, AI obviously being the latest.
Yeah, that's a great question, Carl. I think for me personally, just my nature, I'm a curious person, so I normally, David Epstein wrote a great book called Range, and his book is called Range, and it's called How Generalists Can Lead in a Specialized World. And it kind of gave me life because I feel like that's who I am. I feel like I'm a generalist and I'm working in church comms. Sometimes I feel like I'm surrounded by specialists and I'm the odd man out. But I think the generalist mindset has helped me so much in the fact of the more that I can learn about a broad knowledge of things, then that's really where I can tap into creativity and lead other creatives, because creativity is simply just taking things that we already know and figuring out new ways to put them together. That's all creativity is. And so the more I can learn about AI, the more I can learn about digital marketing, the more I can learn about website and ChatGPT and all these different things, then as a communicator, I can start putting these things together to really kind of lead us to where we're going. And so I think I like to think that I'm patiently impatient. So like you said, Carl, it's like, where do I begin using these AI? Where am I just like, I don't want to just jump into everything, but I do think it's important that we're learning about it all, especially as leaders in church communications and in the church world. Like, we in the church should be leading the way in this type of stuff. Like, we should be, if you look back in the history of church history, we've always been the innovators. Like the virgin birth, like that was new. Jesus saying like, hey, bring in the Gentiles. That's new. Look at the Gutenberg press. Like, that I do think that we should be leading the way in that kind of stuff, but but like you're saying, Carl, not recklessly. Like there's
Right.
a prudency to it. There's a caution to it. So our job as leaders is really to learn as much as we can about it. And then, with wisdom and counsel and a lot of prayer and a lot of discernment, figure out which ones we tap into. I don't think there's an objective way, like this is how you do it. This is the playbook. Step into this, but don't step into that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I want to always bring us back to and I want to see if you agree with this, like what works for the church down the road might not work for you. Like it may not be your deal to be on Instagram or whatever the platform may be. How do you feel about that? Should every church be on every platform, or how do I navigate what my church should be using versus not?
That's fascinating. I think I don't have a great answer for it, but I think what I've always tried to do is, God is going to give a pastor or a leader of a church a specific vision for that church, for that region. Every New York City, my time in New York was a great example of I learned very quickly things that worked at our church in Louisiana did not work in New York City, and I'm learning here that there's things that worked in New York City that are not going to work here. And it's also a vision thing. Our pastor's vision in New York City is going to be different than the vision that God has given our pastors here at Saddleback. And so my job as the church communication to go, okay, what is that vision? And then how do we execute that here? So you're exactly right. I agree. Instagram may work because that's what the method that God has given our church for the vision that it's given our pastor. But, there may be another church in Kansas that they're going, no, God has called us to reach this certain group of people here. And, the Facebook demographic's going to trend much older, maybe that congregation. So they are just going all in on Facebook. Whereas you might have a brand new startup church in the middle of Manhattan that's going after young professionals, 30 years old. If you try to spend all your time on Facebook, you're not going to reach your target demographic. So I do think that it's, it's just like planting a church. You're going to plant the church with a certain vision for a certain amount of for a certain people type. And I think it's the same with our marketing and our communications methods.
Yeah. What churches or ministries that you're seeing are doing this very well? Is there, and of course we're gonna adjust things to our context, but are there principles, or are there methods, or are there examples of churches or ministries that you see that are really crushing it? Slam dunking it every time, you might say.
Bam. Since I've been here at Saddleback, I've learned a ton. Jay Coranda is our online pastor. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him or not. But, Jay's amazing. And every single time I talk to him, I learn something new. And he is I feel like he's tapping into something that is going to be big, is these extensions, is he's using data and figuring out where people are watching our online services or somehow connecting to our church, and really going, okay, they've shown an interest there. Let's see if maybe we can gather some people for a Zoom meeting, or maybe then beginning it right now. And I believe he has 42 extensions. And then coming later this year, we're actually launching a church in Vancouver and Manchester based off from a group of people who've been gathering in an extension. So instead of just throwing a net of let's start a church in Wyoming because we think Wyoming's pretty, it's going, no, or where God, where are you showing us that you are calling us, you are giving us something? So, and I think Elevation has done a great job of that. I know when I was in New York City, they did a couple of pop-ups, and I didn't get to go to any of them, but just talking to some people who did go and just going okay, let's gauge the interest before just, let's count the cost, so to speak. Before we just recklessly go, oh, I want to start a church. We want to reach, urban city. So let's go to Miami. Let's go to Chicago. Why are we going there? What is the point? And then I think even on the flip side of that, I think looking at like what Tim Keller did with that like Redeemer city to city thing is his was a smaller scale. I think you look at like some, Saddleback or Elevation or Life Church would be considered mega churches. Whereas like, Redeemer Presbyterian Church in New York City no one would ever confuse that for a mega church, but they had such a great model to how to reach urban cities that desperately need Jesus. And it's a different model than a mega church model, but it worked for their context. And it's still working today. I mean, his book, Tim Keller's book, Center Church, is a great outline for how to do ministry in big cities.
The world of church communications is changing. Over the past several years, paper bulletins and note cards have been disappearing rapidly. But research shows that active note-taking helps church members better comprehend and understand your message. So, how do you encourage note-taking with the ever-changing technology landscape? My Sermon Notes is an interactive note-taking app that allows church members to fill in the blanks during your sermons. So notes are synced between devices and shareable with friends. Your church community can also stay connected with powerful features like prayer requests and announcements. It's easy to get started and it's totally customizable for your church of any different size. You can sign up today for a 30-day free trial and get 25% off your first year at mysermonnotes.com/churchcom.
What advice would you give churches looking to adopt new communication technologies and platforms? Maybe what resources or strategies would you recommend for staying ahead of the curve, being on that leading edge?
I would say probably the best advice that I've ever received and probably given is just learn as much as you can and talk to a lot of smart people who've already done it and they've made the mistakes. I mean, if I'm thinking about doing something, if I can call some other churches or some other leaders or even talking and reading resources that you guys are putting out. I mean, I stalk those Facebook message groups, Katie, in the church, and just going what are you guys? Oh, is that what y'all are doing? How can I apply that to my context? Or listen, I'm constantly listening to these podcasts. And I mean, you guys, there's a million of them out there, but finding 2 or 3 that you go, this is so helpful to me. And then picking up the phone and calling. I mean, it's amazing. Katie, I'm so grateful for people like you. I've reached out to you. I remember 5 or 6 months ago of hey, I feel like God is kind of showing these things in me. You've done this, help me with this. And you gave me just 2 or 3 actionable advice things do this. And I was okay, and did that. And so that would be my advice to people, Carl, is just reach out to people who've been there and they've already made the mistakes. And you're going to make mistakes. We all are going to make mistakes along the way. But if I can save myself hours and I can save even our church, as we're thinking about stepping into new territories, I'm constantly on the phone with other churches and going, hey, we're doing this. I mean, we're about to start At the Movie series here at Saddleback for the first time. And over the last few months, I've probably talked to 2 or 3 big churches who've done this and go, hey, what's the best way? How do you marketing this? What are some, and just learn, and you're able to kind of see, this is a weird phrase, but see how the sausage is made, and so to speak. And so that's what I'm always doing, is just trying to learn from other people who've already done it.
Are there things that you've taken from other churches and applied them, and have you seen them not work in your new church? You know what I mean? Have you learned some things that you're oh, this is gonna crush, and then you take it and it doesn't work, or you know what I mean? How have you really learned from your experiences, good and bad?
I think the biggest thing is being in New York City taught me so much about, our church was international. We had people watching from all over, people tithing and giving and just a real international audience, which was awesome. And it taught me how to think outside of my zip code. So coming here to Saddleback and just, this is an international church, but even on a larger scale, because you have some campuses who are international who, not just they're watching our online American version, they have their own international version. They're speaking Mandarin, they're speaking Spanish. And so, we're constantly thinking translation, and we're constantly thinking, does this apply in their context? How do we make it apply in their context? So it's not just thinking outside of your zip code, but it's thinking inside of their zip code. and reaching people right exactly where they are. It's what Paul did throughout the entire New Testament, is not going, this is how we do ministry. It's going, oh no, I'm going to reach you, church in Corinth, church in Thessalonica. Like, I'm going to reach people where they are in their environment, in their, so to speak, zip code. I guess Paul didn't have zip codes, but we do now. So, so I think that's a big thing. And then kind of what we talked about earlier, Carl, is just understanding your demographic and nothing bothers me more than when you see, a big mega church do something, then every other church does it. And it's like, that doesn't maybe work for your context and your people. And so, the Bible says Proverbs says too much honey makes you sick. And I think sometimes it's great to take from other people and learn, but don't take too much honey. And because you're going to get sick and it's not going to necessarily work in your context.
Such a good point.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So, Sallie, if you were talking to someone who is just starting in church communications, like they are just got their first job in church comm, what would be your recommendation or advice for getting started?
Start praying. I mean, seriously, like, that is, number one, like, just constantly staying in prayer and asking God because with the world we live in, it is so easy. You can get on this phone and look on Instagram and find every cool new app and every cool new graphic and every cool new email trend and blah, 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 all that stuff. Yeah. But really just praying and asking God for discernment for what is God calling you to do. And that's something, I'm still learning that every single day is, try not to be, we're all learning from other people, but become the leader that God created you to be. You can't be who you pretend to be. And so, that would be my advice to someone, is just really start praying, asking God, what are you supposed to do? And then secondly, what we just talked about, ask for a ton of advice. People are so kind. I'm so grateful for people like you guys and so many others who are paving the way and putting out resources and are available for help for us. I look back and some of my best friends in ministry are people that when I first got into church comms, I just picked up the phone and said, hey, I have no clue what I'm doing. Can you help me? I did a call like that. I literally, before we got on this call, I was thinking through some language and how I want to talk about just first time guests and things like that. And I literally texted a friend who, he's a youth pastor in Texas, doesn't even work in church comm, but I said, hey, how do you say this stuff? He picked up the phone, called me, and he's giving me stuff that he's doing with his youth group. And I'm going, oh, duh, like that makes so much sense. So being open-minded to, as a church comms person and going, you don't always just have to learn from church comms people. And I would say this too, if you're working in a church context in church communications, the number one thing you can do learning about all this stuff is awesome. And there's so much content. The number one thing you can do as a church comms person is build relationships within your church. That is the number one thing I would tell them before you get on the phone and call and learn the best new email marketing strategy is go have a conversation with your worship pastor. Go have a conversation with your small groups pastor, your key volunteers, your youth team, your college team. Those are the people that are you need to understand, number one, their needs. How can you help serve them? But number two, you need to begin to build those relationships because newsflash, you will let them down. Like church comms, everybody needs something. Everybody wants something. Yeah. And we can't
Sometimes you just don't have it.
You don't have it. You don't have it. And you're not going to, I'm sorry, we're not going to be able to get that card in time. We're not going to be able to announce your thing. We're not going to be able to build your website. And so when you have that relational equity, and then sometimes, you guys know this, like things are going to get misconstrued and there's going to be an email and go, well, that sounded weird. And you want people to know when they get that email from you or they get that pushback from someone from your team or whatever, you want them to know, that doesn't sound like Sallie. Let me go have a conversation. Maybe there's, but the only way to do that is to build those relationships and go spend time and hear and hear some. So often I feel like, and I'm so guilty of this, is we think we're the experts on church comms, and we come up with this plan without actually hearing about the ministry and going, what are they trying to accomplish? What is their goal? What is their win? And when I spend time with those people in those ministries, then I'm able to help them and come alongside them and partner with them.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, so Sallie, if people want to connect with you, how can they go about doing that?
Probably the best way. I mean, I'm on Instagram, Twitter. Sallie Guillory is my name. You guys will have to put that in the show notes. That's a Cajun name. No one can spell it. But in my website, sallieguillory.com, I have a blog. Sometimes I write stuff when I have time. I enjoy writing. And I have tons of ways to connect with me on there. And I send out a newsletter every week with I'm a curious person, so I'm constantly reading. And so I don't know if anyone else is curious, but I send it out if people are interested. But I would love to connect with people and help people in any way that I can and share things that I've learned along the way.
Awesome. Well, Sallie, I know that you're in the Facebook group. So if people want to find you, they can come find you in the group.
Absolutely.
So Absolutely. Tag Sallie in some comments and let's, hang out together. But we appreciate so much you being on the show today. So thank you for taking some time.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me. And thank you for all that you guys do. You're really making a difference. I know it's helped me a ton, and I'm excited to see all the people that you guys are going to help here coming up here in the future. So thank you.
Thanks, Sallie.
Thanks for joining us for the Church Communications Podcast. To learn more and get more resources for your church, visit churchcommunications.com.